question. What made you take the leap into politics, Ged?
Well, that's a very good question. All my life I've been an advocate, I think. When I was a nurse, I was advocating for my patients and for the health system. When I was at the Nurses Union, I was advocating for my members and big, broad public policy. And when I was at the ACTU, I was advocating for all workers and workers' rights. And so I guess for me, when I got asked to run for politics, which I did get asked, it seemed a natural progression for me to be able to continue that advocating at a really important level of our government process.
Yep. And as we get closer to the 29 election campaign, what issues have voters been most vocal about in Cooper? Do they vary much across the different areas of the electorate at all?
Oh, well, that's a really good question because, as you know, I have quite a diverse electorate, but there are universal issues. There's no doubt about that. The number one universal issue is schools and education. Everybody is worried or want their children to have the best possible education that they can, and so I'm really lucky because Labor has fantastic policies on education. In fact, we are the party that really makes sure public education stays strong and quality. People are worried about the climate and the environment, and it's interesting because that's such a huge area, but I guess what I could say across the electorate is that yes, people are worried about the environment. The individual issues where they focus might be different. And of course, jobs, everybody's worried about secure jobs, a living wage. Even people in the more affluent areas of the electorate, they worry for their kids having a decent job, and they just know that the economy suffers if people are in insecure work and can't pay the bills. So I think climate, education, jobs are important, and of course healthcare is a universal issue. Everybody wants the best possible public health system we can have, which is something that's very dear to my heart, having been a nurse.
Yeah. And as an MP, how do you manage the needs and expectations of a community that is made up of both affluent and working class areas?
Well, I guess I look at my life. I started out very much working hard as a nurse, doing shift work with young kids. My husband then was a chef doing shift work. We did it really hard in the beginning, struggled to buy a house and just keep the family afloat. So I know what that's like and I understand that. And as a nurse working in the health system, I guess had the opportunity to be quite intimate with people in their lives and understood what makes them tick and what is concerning them. And to be honest, I am a values-based politician, and values don't really change depending on whether you're affluent or not, I don't think. The people in this electorate care very deeply about very similar things, and as long as I can continue to reflect those values in the issues that I fight for and the things I speak up on, then I think the appeal is universal. So it doesn't really matter about your economic status.
Yeah, that's true. And have you found that attitudes have shifted much for voters over your first year as the member for Cooper?
Shifted towards me? You think attitudes generally? Well, it's interesting because you asked me, we were talking about climate as a universal issue. I think that has certainly been elevated, and I'm glad about that because it's something that I really worry about. So that has, for me, moved up very highly. I think it's much more, there's an expectation, more expectation in our political system to deal with it over the last 12 months, 2 years. I've seen that occur. I think that people are very happy with the stance that I've taken and the changes I've made with regards to ALP policy on asylum seekers, and I think that's reflected in what people are saying to me. They're saying that they appreciate the work that's been done on asylum seeker policy. They appreciate the work that I'm doing for schools and education, and they certainly think that I've started a really good change with climate change. We did declare a climate emergency at the Labor Party conference, and so people have gone from saying, what are you going to do, to saying, we can see that you are doing something, what's next, which is great for me, yeah.
And in the 2018 by-election, we saw a swing back to the ALP, despite some commentators saying that the Greens might have a chance of victory. Why do you think the people of Cooper see an ALP representative as the best for their community?
That's a hard question for me. It would be a good one to do a bit of a vox pop on, I think, but the feedback I got at the election was that people understand that Labor is a party of government, and that if you really want change in our legislative processes, and if you really want the country to take a different direction, you need our governments to reflect that and to make good policy to make that happen. And I promised them that I would make real change, and I think they gave me the benefit of the doubt, and I am forever grateful and honoured and privileged that they did that. And I hope that the electorate feels that I have honoured that promise. But yeah, I think that was probably the main thing. I hope that they saw that I was prepared to get out there and fight really hard for them and their values.
Yeah. And what issue would you say is the most commonly discussed by voters across all areas of the electorate? So the most common, I guess, concern for everyone in Cooper?
Yeah, well, as I said before, I think the most common is education. People they want a decent education for their kids, and they want their schools to be quality schools. They want there to be enough time for their children to not only get an education but to be cared for with other social needs like speech pathology and perhaps counselling and psychology, and that's something I'm really happy to say that we can deliver on, the Labor government. Again, climate and the environment, but that varies a lot. Like at the moment, a big issue is waste management and plastics and how that's polluting our oceans and our waterways. People are worried about there not being enough trees, that we don't have a proper canopy. People talk to me a lot about broad climate policy, about meeting our Paris commitments, about moving away from coal-fired power to clean and sustainable energy. So it's such a huge issue. Whilst it might vary between individuals, I think across the board it's probably the biggest issue, apart from decent and secure jobs, which would have equal standing, I think. Yeah.
And young voters aged 18 to 24 have the lowest percentage of voter turnouts in elections. I was wondering if you and your party are doing anything in particular to target this demographic?
Well, I think one of the strongest things to engage young people, apart from running campaigns to encourage them to register to vote, which we do, is to see themselves reflected in the party. And so I'm so lucky that I have a lot of young people volunteering to campaign for Labor, for me in particular in Cooper. So, and I find that encourages other young people to be engaged if they see themselves reflected. They're two things, so encourage to vote, make sure you have young people around you working with you. And then the third thing, of course, is to talk about things that they care about and that they value and that will engage you. I think people get engaged in politics when there's an issue that really affects them. And so you have to be aware of what are the biggest issues for young people, and I think insecure work I think tertiary education and our universities being properly funded is a big issue for young people. So as long as we are talking about those things that they value and care about, then I think like any other aged voter, it's the same across the board, they will be engaged. Yeah.
And our final question, what are some of the most important policies to you personally you wish to implement if elected?
Well, I want to continue my fight for justice for refugees. That's something that is incredibly dear to me and important to me, and I know the people of this electorate. I want to make sure that our response to the climate emergency is robust, strong, quick and complete. So I will be working on that. Continue to fight for decent education and healthcare. I'm very interested in moving towards treaty for our First Nations peoples, something that I am very privileged to be part of in the Labor Party. But another issue that's popped up for me is the issue of homelessness, and I really think that we need to focus a lot on homelessness. To me, it's the key or the answer to everything. I mean, you can't be healthy, it's hard to hold down a job, you can't be engaged in the community properly if you don't have a home. So to me, that's another issue that I'm really keen to get my teeth into.
Yeah. So that's everything. Thanks so much for your time.
No, my pleasure.